Hello and welcome to everyone out there in the Actual Tech Media audience. Thanks so much for joining us on today's webinar. The topic is the end of penetration testing as we know it, why it's time to rethink methods, goals, and expectations. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got a great event, a great discussion here lined up for you today. Before we get started with the event, I do want to walk through the format and a few things that you should know about the webinar. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media. I'll be serving as your host and moderator on the webinar today. We always want these events to be educational. We encourage your questions. They're in the questions pane of the audience console. Many of you have already said hello and good afternoon from across the United States and around the world, but we also want your technical questions about today's topic, of course, around penetration testing. So we'll be doing a live Q&A session at the end of the event. We encourage your questions throughout the presentation, throughout the discussion. So keep those questions coming. We also have a best question prize to maybe help further shake loose some of those questions. If you're not quite sure if you should be asking that or not, ask away and you'll be entered into the best question prize drawing. We also have a number of resources available there in the handouts tab of your audience console. The first one is a link to try out the BugCrowd penetration testing as a service solution. We encourage you to check that out. There's also the ultimate guide to penetration testing and penetration testing as a service done right. These are some really cool ebooks and resources. So make sure that you check out those links for additional information on today's topic. At the end of the webinar today, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. If you're watching this on demand in a recorded format, of course, that drawing would have already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found right there in the handouts tab of your audience console. And then we also have, as I mentioned, our best question prize for an additional gift card, a $50 Amazon gift card. You have to ask a question to be entered into that drawing. We'll be selecting the prize winners after the event and contacting them at that time. All right, with that housekeeping information out of the way, I'm excited now to welcome today's expert presenter. Welcome to Justin Castellan, Head of Product Marketing at BugCrowd. Hey, Justin, it's great to have you on.
Hey, David. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'm seeing people pinging us from all over the country, so yeah, it's great to see everybody here today.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you to everyone out there who said hello or good afternoon. We appreciate that. Let's kick off today's topic. I've been in IT a long time. I was an IT manager for many years, and I've contracted penetration tests before. It works out all right, I suppose, but there's a lot to be improved upon, and that's what we're here to talk about today, specifically around penetration testing tools. I mean, these have been around for forever, a long time, and companies hire consultants and such to perform these kinds of tests. But my question, I guess, to start this off is, why are so many companies out there still getting breached? If there's these penetration testing tools, you would think would kind of help prevent those types of problems. And what's the impact of that?
Sure. Well, let's actually take the conversation up a level beyond above penetration testing, just for cybersecurity in general. And if you take a look at the slide, which actually we need to update because it's current only as of 2021. If it was updated to the current year, you would see that line probably going straight up. It's no surprise to anyone on this webinar that, even after decades of investment and probably trillions of dollars of collective investment, dollars-wise, in cybersecurity tooling and technology and services, it's just not working out. We're seeing breaches almost on a daily basis. It's almost expected at this point. And, there are several reasons for that. One is that these cybersecurity environments tend to be highly fragmented, and where there is fragmentation and where there are gaps, there are opportunities for malicious actors and for threat actors, as we all know. So a lot of these tools and technologies are not very well integrated, and that leaves lots of opportunities for attackers. There's a huge cybersecurity skills gap today, as we all know, and I think the most recent number I saw was there are about 1.5 million cybersecurity roles or requisitions that are still open. So it's very, very difficult for organizations to hire in the way that they want to hire. There is just a huge crisis with respect to lack of talent and access to talent. And generally speaking, we could just do a lot better, right? Now, if we're going to pivot to penetration testing specifically, penetration testing, as we know, as you've mentioned, David, has been around for a long time. I think it's been around since the 1970s. I mean, it's very, very common, and it's sort of when we talk to customers, it's sort of the framework for a conversation about cybersecurity. Like, everyone knows that they need or want to do a penetration test. They might have slightly different definitions of what a penetration test is, and they certainly have different goals with respect to what a penetration test should do. But whatever that definition might be, up until recent years, the way to approach a penetration test was really as a consulting project. So, customers would engage with one of these numerous, boutique pen testing companies that's out there, and I think there are thousands of them for sure. And they would approach the objective as like a consulting project. And there are all kinds of negative connotations with respect to consulting, right? Number one, if you look at the slide, here are some examples. It tends to be quite slow. And this is not good for companies that need to sync their penetration testing cycles with their development cycle, for example. With the pace of development that we see today, particularly with the adoption of cloud, the status quo penetration testing model is not optimized for that very, very fast development cycle. These projects tend to be quite opaque. So you talk to your penetration test provider, you do some scoping, you decide what kind of team you need, and then maybe in a few weeks or even a few months, you get a final report, and sometimes that report is not what you expected. That's a problem. Part and parcel to that approach is that pen tests traditionally have been quite siloed, meaning, again, David, I think we alluded to this in our when we did a sort of pre-briefing on this webinar, is that it's very common for AppSec leaders to get a report, to get a phone book report, and they put it in their desk and they kind of forget about it. They're not very actionable. So the whole point, of course, of penetration testing is to reduce risk, or at least that should be one of the main points. And when a pen test is very siloed like that, they become very, very difficult to follow up on and to make actionable. Furthermore, because of the emergence of, or I should say, the heavy reliance on automated tools like scanners to do penetration testing, many penetration tests, not all, but many of them tend to be quite low impact. So you kind of end up with a report that really might identify the very, very obvious low-hanging fruit, but will not help you understand how a sophisticated attacker, or even a human attacker, I should say, might sort of what their attack vectors into your attack surface might be, and how they might move laterally after getting a foothold in that attack surface. Penetration tests also tend to not scale very well. When you approach a penetration test like a consulting project, it's kind of like an ad hoc thing. You do it once, and then you kind of, if you need to do another one, you have to start over from the beginning and reinvent the wheel. There are customers out there that need to do, multiple penetration tests per year collectively, and we even have, in some big customers, even have to do it hundreds of times if you look across their entire product portfolio. And approaching pen testing like a consulting project is just not going to scale to meet that kind of need. And then finally, lack of talent is also a big one. 20, 30 years ago, the type of skills you might need to do a thorough penetration test probably would not be that hard to find. But as we all know, the attack surface has gotten so complicated and so sophisticated and so expansive. And now it includes things like APIs and cloud infrastructure. It might even include physical devices, like mobile devices, for example. And then you need to add on top of that the whole social engineering component, whereby the technology here is actually not that relevant. It's more about how threat actors might actually social engineer a way into your systems through pretty sophisticated social engineering attacks. So if you want to solve for all those different types of pieces of your attack surface, you need access to talent that's really going to help you understand where those problems are. It's rare that you're going to find one person who's very sophisticated in all of those different areas. Rare, if not impossible. So you really, when you do a penetration test, ideally you would actually build a team that reflects exactly what your targets and requirements are. So that was kind of a long-winded introduction, but I would summarize, what my point here is that status quo penetration testing today is really part of the cybersecurity problem. It's contributing to the cybersecurity crisis, as I like to call it, that's been ongoing for several years now. It's not part of the solution, and it needs to be.
Yeah, great points all around. Well said. I mean, that echoes completely what I experienced as an IT manager when we hired a consulting firm to do a pen test on our IT infrastructure, and it was really spawned by the PCI requirement that we had. We had to meet that. We had to get a pen test done every year, and just like you said, the consulting firm hired somebody. I don't know who they are. And they ran some scanner. They gave us a pretty report a couple months later, and we paid, 10 grand or whatever the fee might be. We checked the box that yes, we had done our test, and maybe there's a couple of decent ideas in there, and we stuck it in the drawer until next year.
Yeah.
But as an IT manager, I didn't really have a good feeling about, hey, yeah, now we're really secure. Because who knows who this person was who tested us, who knows how thorough of a job they did. And things change throughout the year. So it's not up to date, at any point during the year. It's only up to date at that very exact time that it was done. So I completely see what you mean here, and have experienced it myself. And I want to get the audience's feedback around this. I'm just going to bring up a poll now for everyone out there. The poll says, generally speaking, what is your main goal for a pen test? Is it to tick the compliance checkbox for an auditor? Is it to truly reduce risk because you're concerned about these breaches in your IT infrastructure? Is it both if you have compliance requirements? Or is it something that's not on that list? And if so, we encourage you to drop your feedback, your reason to get a pen test in the questions pane there, and I will share it with everyone who's on the event here. So if you haven't done one of these polls before, just check the box that corresponds to your answer right there in the slides window, and I will share the results here in just a moment. And I see lots of responses coming in. Thank you for those. All right. Let me go ahead and share the results now. And Justin, I want to see what you think about this.
Yeah, I'm not that surprised. It's a little bit of a trick question, and it's very, very simplified, obviously. There aren't a whole lot of people who are going to say that we only do a pen test to tick compliance checkboxes, although in fact that might be the case for some customers, which is perfectly fine. I think most customers want to do both, which is perfectly reasonable. The problem, though, is that again, the way that status quo sort of penetration testing industry is set up, it's really designed more for that other requirement. It's really designed for that, very basic, low-hanging fruit. We'll help you pass your PCI audit, but that's as far as we're going to go, kind of thing. When in fact, most customers, most pen test buyers, they want to reduce risk. Obviously, that's why we're all doing pen testing. So, not that surprised.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you everyone for your feedback. Justin, when you've talked to customers out there, what have they said what does a pen test really mean to them?
Yeah, I mean, this is a slide that we show our customers when we do go through this sort of discovery process, because again, one of the things I mentioned at the top of the hour is that there's a lot of variation with respect to what people consider a penetration test to be, or what they want to accomplish, what their objectives are. There actually is no standard definition of a penetration test. And if anybody on this webinar has found one, I'd love to see it, but I'm not aware of one. So it's highly variable. So we kind of put customers into 4 different buckets, and sometimes the same customer will have 2 or 3 of these, depending on the product or what have you. But Generally speaking, you have to think of it almost as like a continuum. Like there's an intensity of testing continuum, and on the far left you have the objective driven by the fact that I need to pass my PCI audit, and I just want a simple report that says we did a pen test. And then we found the super low-hanging fruit that you'll find when you work through a methodology. And then there are, generally speaking, though, I think most customers are looking for what we would consider sort of a standard pen test. The way we define a standard pen test would be a pen test that, in a way, meets the most common compliance and pen testing requirements that we're aware of, like kind of follows the 80-20 rule. And then most of those customers will want a detailed auditor report that, not only will document that the testing took place and, what kind of testing took place, but what those findings were. Now, there are a lot of customers also that have more special requirements. For example, they might need their testers to sit in certain geographies, or they might need testing to occur during certain time windows. They might need to do internal testing versus external testing. So there are sort of like special requirements that are attached to pen tests. And then obviously, as a pen test provider like BugCrowd is, we have to accommodate those. So we have to be able to, again, deliver those sort of very standard pen tests in a very scalable, reliable, and repeatable way. And we also have to allow for some customization for those customers that need it. And then finally, there are customers that want to go beyond these sort of common definitions of a pen test. For example, pen test usually means point-in-time testing, meaning it lasts a certain amount of time, and it's driven by a methodology. But there are customers that actually would like to see pen testing happen continuously. Isn't that interesting? What if you could run a year-long pen test? So there'd be a constant bench of pen testers who are constantly being rotated, who are testing your asset continuously throughout the year. Now that's risk reduction, and that's something that can be delivered by BugCrowd, for example. So again, the point of the slide is just to illustrate the fact that there's a range of testing intensity that customers need, and depending on what their needs are, they're going to fall on different parts of that spectrum.
Yeah, and I love that idea of this kind of continuous testing by a group of experts. It's not just the same person every single time, because different experts are going to have different perspectives and experiences and ways to exploit and test that others might. So this continuous bench of expert testers, and also testing applications and cloud services and APIs before those things are deployed, not after they're deployed. So I think that's very smart. So let's now, go back kind of to the title of the event here, the end of penetration testing as we know it, time to rethink methods, goals, and expectations, and talk about what can we do with kind of this ultimate pen testing as a service solution that BugCrowd has developed.
Yeah. So the way I think about it is, if I needed a pen test, what do I want for Christmas? Like, what are all the things within that pen test that I would want? If my goals are, I want to tick those compliance check boxes, obviously, but I also want to reduce risk and do a lot of the other things that we've talked about already on this call. So there are a bunch of things. First of all, I think probably the most important one that we run into a lot is speed. So if I need to do a pen test, I usually cannot wait for weeks or months for that pen test to launch and complete. I want that pen test to launch within days, and I want it to complete within weeks, and I want my final report, at the end of the month, or whatever the case may be. So the pen test needs to happen fast, regardless of what the scope is or what your requirements are. It needs to be done quickly, and again, consulting does not deliver that. So that's a big one. Another big one is, again, alluding to the skills issue that we've been talking about. A lot of these boutique vendors have like a single pen test bench, a very, really, really good pen testers. But again, if you have a particular target that you need to test, like an API or something, or maybe it's a mobile app, or something that's slightly more exotic than like in a standard external facing web application or network, you're going to want people who are qualified to do that testing working on your program or on your pen test. It's that simple. So wouldn't it be great if you could design a pen test bench that exactly reflects what your goals are for your pen test and your environment? Whether, for example, it's on premises or in the cloud or hybrid or what have you. And not only that, wouldn't it be great if you could rotate those testers whenever you need to do that? Because that is a requirement for a lot of customers. We do often hear that tester rotation is a big deal, and some customers actually, for that reason, need to use a different pen test provider. They need to rotate the providers very easily. But wouldn't it be great if you could just stick with the single platform and then rotate the testers as you need them? That's very attractive. Now, for customers that are again interested in in more intense type of testing where risk reduction is really perhaps more of a factor than achieving compliance, we think that those customers need to look at what we call a pay for impact approach to pen testing, meaning that the testers are paid based on the vulnerabilities they find. They're not paid just for their time, or I should say they're not paid for their time. And even better, if you can combine those things, now that is a great pen test. So one part of the pen test is a methodology-driven pay-for-effort approach, where you're paying for your pen test team to, again, go through that methodology checklist. And then the other part of the pen test, again, is this more unstructured and perhaps continuous type of testing, where you're paying people based on the vulnerabilities that they're finding. So, for example, if a tester finds, what should be considered a P1, well, they should be paid more than a tester that finds a P3. And it's very simple. When you incentivize testers to find more critical vulnerabilities, you're going to find more of them. You kind of get what you pay for. Now, another interesting thing is, we talked about the opaqueness or the non-transparency that's very common with status quo pen testing. Well, we think that pen test buyers should be able to see prioritized findings as they're reported. So in other words, you shouldn't have to wait for that final report. Yeah, you should get a final report. Obviously, everyone needs that for their audit, but you shouldn't have to wait for that final report to be delivered to understand where the problems are. And in fact, we think it's really, really important to give pen test buyers transparency into the testing as it's happening through a dashboard. And in fact, to understand perhaps even where the pen testers are in their checklist. How many steps through the checklist are we in my pen test? Have we just gone through step 1 or are we at step 7? I think that's something that customers generally really like to see. And once, in addition to seeing those prioritized findings, or at least I should say having access to them in real time, how about integrating those findings directly with your security and development processes so your engineers can start remediating immediately? So again, you shouldn't have to wait for that final report to take action. You should be able to begin remediating problems that are found as they're found in real time. And the only way to do that is to literally integrate those vulnerabilities findings with your existing systems through connectors and APIs and webhooks and whatever else you need to do that. That's really, really important. And then finally, with respect to scalability and taking a holistic approach to cybersecurity, we think it's highly desirable for customers to be able to do pen testing alongside other cybersecurity programs like bug bounties and vulnerability disclosure programs, and be able to do all those things, consume all of those things through the same platform. So everything is integrated. You only see one vulnerability across, a unique vulnerability across the platform. You're not going to see duplicates. Everything's going to be prioritized and triaged for you, and everything will be fully integrated with your existing development and security processes. That's how you approach adopt a scalable, repeatable approach to pen testing.
That's quite kind of the ultimate wish list, as you called it, of penetration testing improvements. So is it possible to really deliver all that in a standardized way, like as a service?
It is, and in fact, of course, that's what we do at BugCrowd, among other things, which we can talk about in the next couple slides. The first thing I want to focus on is this pay for impact versus pay for effort type of approach. You might ask, well, what's the difference? Does pay for impact really work? Well, these are findings from an actual bug crowd customer. And as you can see, we're comparing pay for impact testing with pay for effort and with scanning. And as we all know, a scanner is going to give you a bunch of results, but they're going to be very, very noisy and not very actionable. So you're going to get a lot of false positives. You're going to get a lot of low impact vulns. If you're lucky, you might find some P1s or P2s, but it's kind of rare with the scanner. A pay for effort approach, which again is you're paying people for their time to do the testing. You're going to get better results, but you're going to get a lot fewer of them, and it's going to be a much narrower band with respect to what that sort of whole that result set looks like. The best of both worlds, again, is the pay for impact approach, because not only will you get likely more results because you'll have more eyes on your targets, but you'll also see a higher proportion of more critical findings. And again, that's much more actionable and much easier to justify from an ROI perspective for sure than just using a scanner that's going to give you this giant noisy report that's going to go into your desk drawer.
Yeah, I love this idea of pay for impact. I mean, what better way to incentivize these expert penetration testers than to financially compensate them for the vulnerabilities that they find and the severity of those vulnerabilities. So this is the first time I've ever heard of any company out there doing something like this. And so I think it's really unique and really innovative. So I applaud you on that.
Yeah,
let's move on here and talk about the platform or penetration testing as a service, this platform that you all have developed at BugCrowd. What can you tell us about it?
Sure. So I've kind of alluded to it a little bit in the last 5 or 10 minutes. But to summarize, BugCrowd basically what we do is we provide an engineered software and services platform for crowdsourced cybersecurity. And crowdsourced cybersecurity, like pen testing, has been very consulting oriented and heavy in the past. And what we've done is we've solved a lot of the challenges and the problems with that approach using software as a service, with a human-powered services component for things like triage sitting on top of it. So again, what that means is that you can use BugCrowd as a single platform for vulnerability disclosure programs, for bug bounties, for penetration tests, even for attack surface management. And in all cases, whatever form factor your cybersecurity program happens to take, there are a couple common things that you'll experience. One is that you will have access to the right crowd or the right pool of testers for your needs. Again, testers that are qualified and experienced and available and specialized in whatever your targeted environment happens to be. And everything is fully integrated with your existing development and security processes, again, through those those connectors and webhooks and APIs that I mentioned earlier. So it works. It's an actual platform as opposed to a bunch of purpose-built tools that are kind of stitched together, which again can create those gaps that I talked about, which are really, really risky from a security point of view.
Yeah, I love this. And one of the things that stuck out in my head is that, from a high level, someone who's searching for a penetration testing service or report, they might think all penetration testers are the same. Like, hey, I'll just hire a penetration tester. But what I've learned just here in the short time is that they're not. There's a wide range of specialties, like you said, APIs and mobile devices and cloud services, and then experience, of course, their experience doing penetration testing. And then these penetration testers at BugCrowd are incentivized to, really go the extra mile to really find these critical vulnerabilities. And I love that idea. So
yeah, I think the key point there is that every skill set you'd ever need exists in the security researcher or ethical hacker community, which is a gigantic, global, worldwide community, very, very diverse with respect to skill set and mindset and experience. So every skill you need is available out there. The challenge is, well, how do you actually access it? And that's one of the secrets of our platform is that we have this technology called CrowdMatch, which is actually an ML recommendation engine that will, again, using sort of processing hundreds of different dimensions, match your use case with the right security researchers out there, and then bring those people into your workflows when they need to be there. And everything operationally that you need to worry about, like payments and compliance and reporting and triage, that's all provided for you through the platform. So it's really a neat solution.
Yeah, and that's awesome because I know, a lot of medium and small size companies out there, especially, might need penetration testing for compliance and for their auditors, but they don't know who to call. They just call their local VAR or, whoever it is who calls somebody else. And I mean, who knows what sort of penetration, tests they get and what quality of tester they receive from that. And here you have this whole crowd of experts to rely upon from the community. And so I think that's cool.
And we also recognize that people who are doing penetration testing, have a pretty high bar with respect to trust. So we actually have a bench. We actually have select from the crowd people who are uniquely qualified to do penetration testing. And there's a number of ways that we do that. But the point is that, you're not, again, just relying on, somebody faceless out there in the crowd. We actually spend a lot of time vetting. In fact, we probably, in some cases, will vet pen testers more thoroughly than you might even vet your own employees. Not every time. I'm not going to make a general statement about that. But certainly for some use cases, I think that's a claim we can make.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, let's now move on to Q&A with the audience here. We encourage your questions. We got a lot of great questions that have already come in. If you have a question on your mind, now's the time to get it in. I see, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and just start with this one for now. They're saying, IT infrastructures today are far more complex than ever before. Can BugCrowd really pen test these complex infrastructures with, mobile devices, APIs, multiple clouds, containerized applications, things like that? Can BugCrowd really handle all of that?
So the answer is yes. And the reason for that is, again, it's the point I just made a couple minutes ago, which is that we are able to engage with and activate exactly the security researchers that you need for your targets and your environment and your use case. Every skill set you need is out there. It's just a matter of connecting and doing it in a very engineered and scalable way that makes you very productive and brings you great results. So, we don't need to have all of those people on staff as BugCrowd employees. That's not the approach here. It's the opposite, which is that we give you access to the world's security talent literally on demand for the use cases that you have.
I like that. That's really cool. Let's see. Here's another good one here. Traditional pen tests are done after things are live. Could this help to prevent breaches before they happen by performing pen tests on, say, applications that are still in development? Is that possible?
Yeah. Well, again, that's more of a general question about pen testing, I think. But yeah, I mean, of course, you can do pen test internal targets. And there are companies, of course, that for their internal controls will require a pen test on new releases, new products, or major updates to existing products. And yeah, I mean, we see this approach as being very, very conducive to cloud, to DevOps, with respect to, again, that continuous development cycle. That looks like a circle. It's people, waterfall development is on the way out, or is more rare. Continuous development cycles is kind of more typical today, and this approach is designed for that exactly.
Nice. And then with BugCrowd, just to clarify, is a human or an automated tool performing the test?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. It depends on what your needs are, right? So if you're just looking for that, basic type of pen test where you just, want an auditor report, an attestation or something, that's something you could do, a scan, more or less an automated scan will take care of that. For anything beyond that, your pen testers themselves will bring they'll bring their own toolbox, right? So every pen tester has their own toolbox. So they might use a combination of scanners and other tools in addition to their own human skills to meet your goals for that pen test. So it's kind of like, again, you have to think of it almost like it's a bottomless toolbox. The more pen testers you have, or the more eyes on target that you have, the more toolboxes you're going to have, and the less risk you're going to have.
Smart. I like that. There's another question here. Can I tailor what gets tested?
Absolutely. That's what we call scope. So the first part of any pen test effort is to decide what the scope is. What's going to be tested, what's off limits. Again, if you're testing an internal target, there are other authentication, access and authentication things, that need to be worked through. But yeah, absolutely, scope is a major part of the process.
Okay, and I think you covered that.
I'm sorry. Then there are some customers that have a more open scope. It depends on you as the pen test buyer.
Okay. And I think you covered this one, but how long does it take to get the results once the tests start?
Again, it really depends on the scope of your test. It probably could be as soon as a couple weeks, all the way out to maybe more like a month or 6 weeks. It depends on the scope of your test. It depends on the targets. There's a lot of variation there. The main point, though, is that regardless of the total length of the test, you will be able to launch very quickly, generally within days, within 2 or 3 days.
Nice. That's fast. Let's see. I want to take a moment to call your attention, everyone out there, to the link that's on the screen right there. That is a hyperlink. If you click on that, bugcrowd.com/product/pentest-as-a-service, that will take you to the BugCrowd penetration testing done right landing page there. There's all sorts of links on there. There is a link in the top right to try BugCrowd out for yourself. So make sure that you don't leave without checking that out. Let's see, Justin, there's lots of other great questions here coming in from the audience. Jeffrey's asking if you have any offerings for MSPs.
So we do not today have a specific offering for MSPs. It's something we are thinking about, though. So okay. If you're an MSP and you're interested, please get in touch and we'll talk.
Excellent. Do you see any other questions?
Sorry, David. I just want to point out, I did see somebody in the chat say they ran into a broken link. I'm not sure which link they're referring to. Just make sure that the link you see you're looking at here under Learn More, that you put a www in front of it. Yeah.
Yes, and I did respond. If anyone has any trouble with the link there in the Handouts tab that says Try BugCrowd, just push refresh on your web browser, and that should fix the link. But the link that's right there on the screen in the Slides tab, that one certainly does work. So check that one out. There's a link in the top right-hand corner to Try BugCrowd, which is the same link that's over in the Handouts tab, by the way. So yeah, great point. Thank you, Justin.
Sure.
Let's see, another good question I saw here from the customers that you've dealt with. They're asking for examples of, what sectors or industries typically have the most sophisticated requirements out there. Like, what kind of sophisticated pen tests have you all done?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the usual suspects, regulated industries. So, financial services, government, healthcare, companies in those industries. There are some companies that have fairly exotic requirements. But again, we actually have customers that, need physical devices and firmware penetration tested. So, they'll actually ship a physical device to us. It's whatever your target, we can probably handle it for you.
Excellent. Jeffrey's got a question out there. He's asking about, basically the risk in performing a penetration test. What do you say to customers out there who are nervous about performing a pen test, that it might actually cause them some sort of downtime?
I think the risk is quite low, actually. Again, because there are some steps involved with respect to pen test design involving scope and really documenting carefully what's on limits, what's off limits, how people access the systems they need to access if it's an internal target, which range of URLs need to be tested if it's an external target. I think generally that's one thing the penetration testing industry has probably figured out pretty well is, it's generally speaking, you're not going to introduce risk by doing a pen test. I think that the methodologies and the approaches there are pretty time tested.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. It's not just like you enter your IP and push a button and it starts. I mean, there's a lot more, I'm
Yeah,
sure, that goes
it's not
into
a free
that.
for all. Yeah,
Right.
exactly right. It's not a free for all. Yeah.
Right. Um, let's see. Satyam is wanting a demo. Is that something you all offer? Or if someone goes to the Try Bug Crowd link and they want to see this in action, how does that work?
Yeah. So we can do demos. We think live demos are just a better way to do it, just because there are so many, different moving parts. So we absolutely can do a demo for you. Just fill out the form behind that URL, and we'll get in touch and do one for you.
Okay. Excellent. Heath is asking about integrations between Bug Crowd and say something like ServiceNow. Do you have any sort of integration?
Absolutely. So we have a number of pre-built connectors for what we consider key systems. ServiceNow is one of them. So we have a turnkey integration between Bug Crowd and ServiceNow, and GitHub and Slack and a number of other critical systems. I think the thing that's most important though is that we have a rich API. So if you have integration requirements that are not met by a pre-built integration, or you have some sort of a customized integration you need to do, that is totally possible and on the table using the API.
Excellent. Francisco's asking, how does pen testing as a service, the cost and implementation time compare to the typical pen test solution?
It depends on what you mean by typical pen test solution. I would say, compared to the status quo traditional type of pen test providers, Bug Crowd will be very, very competitive, or even underneath there, and certainly will, I think, be faster, quicker to launch and quicker to complete. There are some more modern vendors out there that offer a penetration testing as a service type approach, which we think is great for the industry. However, most of them tend to offer what we consider pen tests that are more on the low intensity end of the spectrum that we talked about earlier. So you might end up with a pen test that's a little more focused on low hanging fruit as opposed to risk reduction. But we encourage you to look at them all and to make your own decisions, and we're happy to talk you through that.
Excellent. Eric's asking, how fast does a pen test start typically once the scope is defined?
Yeah, again, that's generally within days. So I think again, it kind of depends on the scope and the targets that are involved. But I think generally speaking, think of it as like scoping and launch and everything happening generally within the same business week. But again, it depends on the scope.
Okay. Let's see. Lots of great questions out here. I think we've covered most of them, unless there's any others that caught your eye, Justin.
I think the only other one I see here is from Simeon, who asked, I think this is a good question. He says, general industry question, I'm seeing more and more pen test companies selling vulnerability scans as penetration tests. How do we get them to stop doing that? I think that's a great question. I don't think we can get them to stop doing that, but we can ask or help educate customers about the fact that, again, you should expect more from a pen test. We should all expect more from the pen test industry beyond just doing a simple, automated scan and delivering, a noisy report that's completely unactionable. We have to do better than that as an industry. And fortunately, there are alternatives that will do that, and BugCrowd obviously is one of them. So I guess what I would do is I would encourage everybody on this call and on this webinar to ask questions and to make sure you understand what you're getting from your penetration tests, and to know that you're going to get, more than, they're going to do more than just run a scanner and give you a report in 3 or 4 weeks. You can get better. You can do better than that.
And I think that's a great point to wrap up on. You can do better than the typical legacy traditional penetration test. Look for new solutions and definitely consider BugCrowd. I encourage everyone to check out the BugCrowd penetration testing as a service solution right over there at bugcrowd.com. Click on Try BugCrowd. Justin, thank you so much for educating us on the value of penetration testing and what to look for in our next solution. It's been a great discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
And of course, thank you to everyone out there in the Actual Tech Media audience for joining us on the event. Don't forget about the resources there in the handouts tab. And with that, I will announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card here on the live event. This is going out to our prize winner, which is Benedict Jones from California. Congratulations, Benedict Jones from California. We'll reach out to you, and we'll also reach out to our best question prize winner as well. Don't forget to visit bugcrowd.com for more information, and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.